Hi, everyone. I'm Rena Ninan. Thank you for joining us. President Trump is facing backlash on Capitol Hill over claims that he directed the Justice Department to intervene in the case of Roger Stone, a convicted longtime associate. Democratic lawmakers will hear from Attorney General William Barr next month. Senior officials from his office overruled a sentencing recommendation by the DOJ. Stone initially faced up to 9 years in prison after being convicted of 7 charges, including lying to officials and witness tampering. All 4 prosecutors working on the case resigned after the sentencing change. CBS News White House correspondent Ben Tracy has more on the fallout.
They treated Roger Stone very badly. They treated everybody very badly.
In the Oval Office, the president continued to lash out at Roger Stone's prosecutors.
It's a disgrace, and frankly, they ought to apologize to a lot of the people whose lives they've ruined.
In November, a jury found Stone guilty of 7 counts of witness tampering, lying to Congress, and obstruction. The president's comments and his attack on the judge overseeing the case drew rare rebuke from Republicans.
I think this is a situation where the tweet was very problematic.
I don't think the president should have tweeted about an ongoing case.
But they also said they're not concerned about the Department of Justice being independent.
I have a lot of confidence that they got it right here.
The president praised Attorney General William Barr for intervening in the case. But Barr claims he did not coordinate with the White House when he overruled the prosecutors and sought a lighter sentence.
Attorney General William Barr ought to be ashamed and embarrassed.
Barr's actions have prompted a flood of criticism from Democrats and former Justice Department leaders.
For the department to have cast its lot firmly in this way is abysmal.
Barr has repeatedly been accused of working too closely with the president, including when he characterized the findings of the Mueller report before it had been released.
I'm going to make the decisions based on the law and the facts.
Barr dismissed the criticism in an interview with CBS News in May.
I think it just goes with the territory of being Attorney General in a hyper-partisan period of time.
For more on all this, I want to bring in Paula Reid, Catherine Herridge, and Meridith McGraw. Paula is a CBS News White House correspondent. Catherine is a CBS News senior investigative correspondent. And Meridith is a White House reporter for Politico. So, Paula, it doesn't seem like the president's backing down from trying to influence the Stone case.
Not at all. He is clearly undeterred by this criticism or these questions about political influence over the Justice Department. In fact, the first thing he tweeted about today was the Stone case, raising questions about the lead juror in that trial. So in terms of an influence campaign, looking back at this week, so far he has tweeted about the sentence. He's congratulated the Attorney General for getting involved, even as the Justice Department's press office is trying to convince people this was in no way a coordinated effort. He's tweeted about the judge and now the jury. Now, an important note on the jury, though. I will say that even though the president and others are trying to raise concerns that the lead juror in the Stone case supports the Democratic Party, has posted criticism of President Trump, we have to remember that when the president's former campaign chairman Paul Manafort was tried in Virginia, there was a juror who's spoken publicly, who was on that case. She was an ardent supporter of President Trump. She drove to trial every day with a MAGA hat on her back seat, but she still voted to convict Paul Manafort. So it's not clear that if you don't like the president or if you like the president, that really influences your decision in a trial about one of his associates.
You know, Catherine, I'm curious what your sources are telling you at the Justice Department about the president's approach to the Stone case at this point.
Well, the Justice Department has been very consistent that they acted independently. The decision to dial back the sentencing recommendation for Roger Stone was done independently of the White House, and there was no communication with the White House. I know through my reporting for CBS News that the most senior levels of the Justice Department, they want to restore confidence in the department and the FBI, and they want to make clear that it will not be used as a political weapon. And when you read in between the lines, what they're getting to is this idea that the last few years we've seen these prosecution of process crimes. I'm not minimizing those crimes, but lying to Congress, lying to federal agents when the underlying allegation does not pan out for prosecutors. And this is something, based on my reporting at the most senior levels of the Justice Department, they want to avoid in the future as part of a process to restore confidence in the FBI and the Justice Department, Rena.
We know that the Senate Minority Leaders requested an Inspector General investigation. Is that something you think the DOJ would consider?
Well, this letter has gone to the Inspector General, Michael E. Horowitz. He is the independent watchdog within the Justice Department. And this is an office that does not routinely comment on ongoing investigations or whether, in fact, they're picking up a case. And they told CBS News that they would not comment on any questions about Senator Schumer's letter. What I would say, practically speaking, is that even if the Justice Department Inspector General picked up this investigation, these investigations can take 12 months to 18 months to play out. So you have to wonder whether these requests almost amount to almost a press release, if you will, because practically speaking, it just does not move that quickly here in Washington.
Yeah, it certainly does take time. Meridith, I want to ask you about Attorney General William Barr. We know that he will appear before the House Judiciary Committee on March 31st. What's the White House saying about this? Are they concerned about him speaking?
The White House feels that President Trump is well within his right. He's exerting his executive authority within all of this. But it is interesting that he will be appearing at the end of next month, which does seem a million years from now in this news cycle. But when I was talking with one White House official recently, they said in the aftermath of his acquittal in the impeachment trial, he feels emboldened, of course, and unleashed with all of this. And I think that's why we're seeing him ramp up some of his actions here, particularly with the removal of Admiral Vindman, Jesse Liu, and then of course his speaking out against Roger Stone's sentencing, as we've seen in this past week.
Yesterday, the president refused to say if he's going to pardon Roger Stone. Why is he sort of hesitating, or is he even hesitating on that?
It's fascinating, Rena, because Stone is one of 6 Trump associates who have either pleaded guilty or been convicted by a jury on charges that arose out of the Russia investigation. Now, during that investigation, the special counsel examined whether the president had sort of dangled pardons, either publicly when asked by me and other journalists whether he would pardon some of these folks, or even privately in conversations with attorneys for his former deputy campaign chairman, Rick Gates, or lawyers for Paul Manafort, whether he was dangling pardons as an effort to influence their cooperation. And during that time, the president's attorneys urged him not to pardon anyone or even talk about it. But now that the special counsel investigation is behind him, a lot of folks are pretty surprised that he hasn't issued any of these pardons just yet. As you noted, he's been asked a few times over the past few days about the possibility of a pardon for Roger Stone, and he's been non-committal. But the president has broad powers to issue pardons, to issue clemency, and it's been interesting to see how the president has used that so far. He has issued pardons and granted clemency for folks that he believes were treated unfairly, perhaps in a partisan manner. He has pardoned Scooter Libby, Dinesh D'Souza, also Sheriff Joe Arpaio. He's laying the groundwork for the possibility that he will potentially pardon some of his associates, specifically the ones that did not cooperate. We know that his former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, pretty much his entire defense was based on an expectation that if he did not cooperate, that he would ultimately be pardoned. But it's just not clear how long the president will wait. It could be potentially another 5 years if he gets reelected and waits till the end of his term. And look, Paul Manafort is not a young man. He's also not a healthy man. So it's really fascinating that the president is holding off on any pardons for his associates who got caught up in the Russia investigation.
Catherine, can we expect any further fallout when you look at these career Justice Department officials who might be upset at how this Roger Stone case has transpired? Do you expect more people to walk?
Well, the question is somewhat speculative, Rena. So what I'll lay out is really, I think, 3 scenarios that people ought to consider. Number one, we have an almost imminent interview with another network with the Attorney General William Barr, and that will do a lot to either clarify the steps that were taken by the Justice Department, or it may create more questions as to whether there was any engagement with the White House, which the Justice Department has denied. Also, I'd look for whether there's any action by this federal judge to bring the parties together before sentencing to try and deconflict the accounts here and exactly what happened, because the decision is ultimately up to this federal judge. It's only a recommendation from the prosecutors as to sentencing. And finally, what I would say is that when you look ahead to this public hearing with the Attorney General William Barr, I think there actually could be a significant advantage to be gained by Republicans as well. Barr is very good in these public testimony, and he can lay out once again why he chose not to go down the obstruction route in the Mueller probe, and he can also explain the Roger Stone case. But I think more importantly, and this is the story which I think is sort of the next crest of the wave, which is this surveillance abuse that was found with the National Security Court. We know in the Senate that Senator Lindsey Graham is planning closed depositions and public hearings, and Attorney General Barr is very keen to restore confidence in the FBI, the Justice Department, and the National Security Court, if only for the fact that that court has essential tools which law enforcement needs for counter-espionage cases as well as terrorism cases inside the United States. And there is real concern that if those sorts of reforms are not enacted and confidence is not increased, that the FISA court or the National Security Court could have its powers limited or be shut down altogether, Rita.
So, Meridith, the president's continued his attacks on Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, as well as his former chief of staff, John Kelly, who's been speaking out about how hard it's been to have worked for him. What further moves do you think the president might take as he sort of continues his post-impeachment purge?
It's going to be important to take a close look at anybody who testified or was involved in any of these cases. Most recently, Jessie Liu. She oversaw the cases for Manafort and Stone, of course, and the president was upset with the way that it was handled, and she would have been going to the Senate today for a hearing, but she resigned, and she would have been going over to the Treasury Department to take an important role in the Financial Terrorism and Crimes Division. And then, of course, with President Trump today lashing out against John Kelly, the president feels that now it's his time to speak out against all of those that have wronged him. He was on Geraldo Rivera's radio show this morning and continued his attacks on General Kelly. He continued his attacks on even Senator Mitt Romney, who, of course, voted him guilty for one of the impeachment articles. So the president's going to be continuing, to, up his public disapproval of anyone he feels has been disloyal to him or has treated him wrong, he feels, throughout this process.
And Paula, before we go, I want to ask you about former White House Communications Director Hope Hicks, who we're hearing is returning to the White House after a 2-year absence. What will her role be, and how did she kind of get to this point of coming back?
This was a surprising return because she's one of the few people who was able to serve in a high-profile role here at the Trump White House and get out largely unscathed. She landed in a lucrative communications job at Fox, but she's coming back. The White House insists she's not actually going to be in a communications role this time. She'll be working as a senior advisor to the president's son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner. Her official title will be counselor to the president. That is the same title that is held by Kelly and Conway. And you can imagine that the president at this time, with all the leaks, the high-profile exits, the books being written by former officials, that he is probably quite pleased to have someone that he trusts so much coming back into the fold ahead of the campaign.
All right, Paula Reid, Catherine Herridge, Meridith McGraw, thank you very much for joining us.